one of the mentors for the CSW program and sommelier testing candidates. And we're very happy to have him with us today to help moderate this tasting. Also, we have Vince Williams. Of course, Vince is our techie extraordinaire who is going to run our PowerPoint today, also a certified AWS wine judge. He's also an instructor and sommelier at a local wine specialty shop in spare time. He's a CSW from the Society of Wine Educators and a level 3 graduate of WSET. Vince has also completed a certificate program in winemaking through the California Davis. And I forgot to mention Aaron's a lawyer in his spare time as well. So Melissa Bartlett is also with us. Melissa is the creator of the PowerPoint for this year's National Tasting Project. Melissa is a fellow AWS certified wine judge, certified sommelier, consultant, educator, and winery manager. She has also instructed the Super Taster continuing education courses offered through AWS.
And let's not forget our National Tasting Project Chair, Sharon, who aside from being an accomplished wine director, is a fellow certified wine judge with the American Wine Society. She's a CSW and a WSET Level 3 graduate. She is currently in the process of completing the WSET 4 diploma while she's still devoting her volunteer time to us by successfully organizing this year's national tasting of Washington State wines. Sharon Kervin.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa.
You're welcome.
I want to also mention these 2 sessions are being offered to supplement the National Tasting Project and give a chance for everyone to score the wines on their own at home, since many of the chapters, because of COVID, have not been meeting. If you have already met, these sessions are just a fun, interactive way to get further education on Washington State appellations and the vintage variations that we'll be discussing, because some of the vintages have, of course, changed through the course of the year. Also, if you have not yet conducted the National Tasting Project but have plans to do so, please do not watch this recording or the one next week. Just listen to and watch the recorded sessions and not watching them live with us, because we don't want our scores to influence your chapter's scores when you conduct your tastings. Okay, so finally, before I hand over the mic, I just want to briefly explain what is the National Tasting Project. It is normally, pre-COVID, the largest wine tasting of its kind. Our 7,000 plus members are invited to all score the same 12 wines using a version of the Davis 20-point scale. It's a means of calibrating our palates to see where we stand, both from the different wine aficionados, industry professionals, winemakers, educators, certified wine judge, and otherwise spirited wine drinkers, as most of us are, to see how we stand up against one another. The goal is to keep the average scores between 1 to 2 point spread. Over the last few years that I've been chair of this project, I'm very happy to report that we have always come usually within a 1 point spread between the chapter averages, thus obtaining successful calibrations for this project. So without further delay, I'd like to hand everything over to Vince.
Thank you, Sharon. So for those that are familiar with the Zoom calls, we do have the chat session open. Melissa, Aaron, and Sharon will be watching that, trying to answer the questions. I'm kind of ignoring everything that's on the screen so that I can concentrate on giving you the information. Afterwards, we'll come back to a final Q&A at that point. Anything that we've missed or that they weren't able to answer during the presentation. So for the 2 presentations we're doing on Zoom, I've adapted the National Tasting Project presentation that Melissa put together. What she put together was put back in place in the beginning of the year, and things change in the wine world. I've had to re-update this thing as of yesterday because Washington Wines added a new AVA. So we're going to continue trying to keep up-to-date information as much as we can. So next week's probably going to have to redo again, just the way that changes. So for today's session, we'll be discussing 6 of the National Tasting Project wines. Hopefully you've had the opportunity to judge, like Sharon said. So just sit back, grab a glass of sparkling wine or another Washington wine, and we'll go through the tasting of the American Viticulture Areas, or AVAs, of Washington State. And probably ought to let you see a slideshow while I'm at it. Dun, dun, dun. So the 2020 National Tasting Project is a study of Washington State. Over the last 20 years, Washington has grown from 4 AVAs to 16 approved AVAs. We'll also talk a little bit about a new proposed AVA later on in today's presentation. Ste. Michelle Wine Estates was chosen to be this year's wine supplier due to their availability nationwide. Unfortunately, much of Washington State wines are not distributed outside of the state. So you'll have to go actually visit Washington to get a good taste of all of their wines. One of Ste. Michelle Wine Estates winery, Chateau Ste. Michelle, is Washington State's founding winery. While it has been known as Chateau Ste. Michelle since only about 1967, it actually traces its roots back to 1934. The 1,000th winery was licensed last year. Today, there's 10 more active wineries in the state. So let's take a couple minutes and let's hear from the Washington State Wines Commission.
This story, our story, is more than cliches and old world heritage. It is a story of world-class wine. A region already established, but still emerging. Its characters are visionaries, people, and not brands. Individuals who challenge convention, collaborate, and don't take themselves too seriously. It's a story about passion, about being good stewards of the land and magical dirt, sunlight that shines for days, and water snaking through pristine landscapes. These stories are real, just beginning to emerge and find their voice. But it's not just our story. This story starts where all great stories begin, with you in mind. When was the last time you stepped foot in a landscape sunny and warm and were surrounded by vines, vibrant and alive? Or the time you shook hands with a winemaker who, after working all week as an engineer, returned to his winery, his passion to pour his wine and share it with you. The last bottle of wine you opened, did you know its story? Did you sit laughing, sharing a meal, and recounting the first time you tasted the wine as the sun set against an endless sky? These stories are meant to be shared, experienced, meant to bring people together and unravel over time. These stories don't happen in a far-off place. They're not fairy tales or set in stone. These stories start here, in the state of Washington.
So Washington's first grapes were planted in 1825 by the Hudson Bay Company at Fort Vancouver. Wine grapes followed the path of the early French, German, and Italian settlers. Italian and German varieties were originally planted in the Yakima and Columbia Valley. In 1937, Dr. Walter Clore arrived on the Washington wine scene as an assistant horticulturist at the Washington State University's Irrigated Agricultural Research Extension Center in Prosser. During the 1960s, he conducted research on more than 250 American, European, and hybrid varieties. His meticulous research helped convince Washington winemakers and growers that they could grow vinifera. Dr. Clore is recognized as the father of Washington wine industry. Commercial scale plantings began in the 1960s with efforts of the earliest producers, predecessor to today's Columbia Winery and the Chateau Ste. Michelle, attracted the attention of wine historian Leon Adams. Adams, in turn, introduced pioneering enologist André Telesheff to Chateau Ste. Michelle. It was Telesheff who helped guide Chateau Ste. Michelle's early effort for the premium wine production. With over 600,000 acres under vine, Washington produces approximately 19.4 million cases of wine annually. That totals about $8.4 billion in total economic impact to the state. Let's begin our discussion with the Columbia Valley, AVA. This is the largest AVA, was established in 1984, encompassing the entire Columbia Basin, including areas of Oregon. This is the largest AVA in the United States, weighing in at 11 million acres. 17,000 of those are currently under vine. With approximately 99% of wine grape grown in the Washington state. The Columbia Valley AVA is further divided into 11 sub-regions, Ancient Lakes, Candy Mountain, which is a brand new one, Horse Heaven Hills, Lake Chelan, Natchez Heights, Rattlesnake Mountain, Red Mountain, Royal Slopes, also a fairly recent addition, Snipes Mountain, Waluke Slope, Walla Walla Valley, and Yakima Valley. An additional region, the Burn, has just completed its public review period and is back with the United States Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau for their consideration. The AVAs not included in the Columbia Valley AVA are the Lewis and Clark Valley, which is shared with Idaho, the Puget Sound, and the Columbia Gorge, which is also shared with Oregon. As I stated earlier, Columbia Valley is very dry. It has a continental to Mediterranean climate, and the sub-AVAs have a varying meso and microclimates that help differentiate those areas. The Columbia River, shown here, meanders through the valley, allowing for irrigation. You'll notice that the tan versus bright green vegetation, that indicates where irrigation is occurring. The black on the top of those hills, that's burn marks from fires the previous year. Let us mention phylloxera for a moment. The dry weather coupled with the sandy soils and in that area, plus also some of the other activities that are going on, allowed for their plants to be on their own rootstock. However, that's starting to change. Unfortunately, phylloxera is starting to impact the vineyards of Columbia Valley. Vineyards are planted predominantly on south-facing slopes, increasing solar radiation in the summer and promoting air drainage in the winter. The growing season lasts between 180 and 200 days with an annual rainfall between that 6 and 8 inches in most of the Columbia Valley. Early and late season frosts and winter freezes are the main environmental threats to this area. In 2018, Washington State as a whole produced over 250,000 tons of grapes. The 5 leading grapes are listed on the chart above and account for more than 75% of the production. By now, it seems like I've been talking for hours and we haven't even gotten to any of the wines. Well, now's your chance to hear about the wines that we've included in today's session. So we're going to take a virtual wine trip. Let's begin with Spokane, up on the eastern border, and we'll head south toward Port Washington, Washington, site of former Fort Vancouver. If you're already scored your wines, break out your salty appetizers or your sushi rolls. Our first wine this afternoon is Domaine Saint Michel Non-Vintage Brut. It is sourced from premium grapes in the Columbia Valley. Since the Columbia Valley vineyards sit at the northerly latitude, similar to France's Champagne district, this latitude gives the regional 2 additional hours of sunlight during the peak growing seasons. The ample sunshine and cool evenings create ideal conditions in developing superior flavors and crisp acid. The winemaker for this wine, Paula Eakin, ferments individual lots for 2 to 3 weeks and then blends those lots together to their desired cuvee using the same 3 grapes that the Champenois have used for centuries. She does blend more than one vintage together in order to create a consistent style. Aaron, would you discuss a little bit about what we found in this wine?
Sure. This is a traditional method. Its color was fine. Gave it 3 points. Bright, clear, reflective, light lemon. The aroma, only about a medium intensity. Lemon zest, yellow apple, a little biscuit, which is a traditional method. You'd expect to have that. The flavor, lemon cream with medium intensity palate. There's a little yellow apple, a little touch of sweetness from residual sugar, a little biscuit. There's a tart acidity with some persistent bubbles and a light body. Really, the flavor and the aromas, I gave both a 4. There's a medium finish of yellow apple and biscuit. This is really kind of like a beginner sparkling wine. Doesn't really have a lot of excitement or character to it. I thought it was probably a wine that's going to be competing more with Prosecco than with other traditional method wines like Champagne. I gave it a 14.5, which is high bronze. And Sharon gave it a 13 and Vince gave it a 15. So we were at about a 14.2 on average. So this is a bronze medal wine. It's a decent wine, but nothing to write home about. Certainly one that if you're sitting on the patio, you'll be happy drinking it, but you're not going to be buying a case of it. So.
I feel like the time on the lees was very, very short. I
thought it was like 9 months maybe on the lees.
Yeah. I mean, I dinged it for that.
I will say it's very quenching on on your palate when you're presenting in front of a group of about 51 different sites.
And getting a question as to the retail price for this wine. What was this, guys? This was
I paid $12.50.
Something like that.
Yeah, and pretty much. I grabbed another bottle around here for about the same price. So it just kind of depends on the locale. But if you got it through Market View, it was about $12.50.
So it's
Someone asked about the residual sugar at 1.52 qualifying as brut.
Yeah, that would be.
It's on the high end of brut, but yeah, it's still in that brut category. Yes. So regular sugars versus when you're talking residual sugar for still wine versus sparkling wine versus a different locale. In Europe, everybody has their own little realm, but for a typical sparkling wine, 1.5 is right on that brut, still in that brut category, but it's approaching extra dry. Okay.
If you guys were wondering about the time on the lees, really that's kind of like the biscuit characteristics, the yeastiness that you get there. 9 months you don't get very much, and this just doesn't have very much. Some of the older champagnes that spend a lot of time on the lees, you really get a lot of that character, and that's because they spend a lot of time on the lees. The lees break down, giving it that yeasty character, as well as a certain kind of creaminess on the palate.
Okay. So let's go ahead and head on to our second wine. This is also from the Columbia Valley AVA. It's the Chateau Saint Michelle Cabernet Sauvignon. The warm, sunny days and cool evening temperatures in the Columbia Valley create an ideal conditions for the intense aroma and flavor development in the ripening of grapes. The winemaker Bob Berthau inoculates destemmed ripe grapes with the various strains of yeast to maximize complexity. He uses gentle pump overs during the fermentation. That's to help extract color, flavor, and produce some soft, supple tannins. The wine is aged for about 18 months in a combination of American and French oak, which about 14% is new barrel. We realize not everybody has been able to get the right vintages just because of what's available throughout the country. I know I ended up getting the 2016 vintage, even though we're talking 2017 vintage. So depending on what you had, you may have a slightly variation of what grapes were involved. Aaron, you want to talk a little bit more about this wine?
Sure. For this price point here, this was like a $13 Cabernet. This is a pretty well-made wine. It's fairly solid. It's not an exciting Cabernet, but for $13, this is a pretty decent wine. The color, again, bright, clear, reflective, a darker garnet. Medium plus intensity. I picked up a lot of black cherry, blackberry, plum. There was some coconut from use of American oak, and there was also some cedar, also from oak. So I gave it a 5 on the aroma. The flavors followed through, or aromas followed through on the palate. Still medium plus intensity with some medium plus balance, or medium plus, body. It was balanced. The finish was a little disappointing. Really just the oak dominated, a lot of cedar. You didn't get a lot of fruit on the finish. But this was a decent wine, a well-made wine, very good at its price range. I gave it a 16.5 for overall. And let's see, I think that we were all pretty.
Yeah, I gave it a 16.
Good wine.
I was at a 16.5.
Yeah.
Vince gave it a 16.5.
16.1 was our average.
Yeah, so we were all right around that 16 level.
And so all the medals that we're giving, what we've done is we've pulled the information. So where our scores average out, which is what we do in a normal tasting, we'll have a panel, usually 3. This time we did 4. We have to come within 2 points of scores. If we don't, we thumb wrestle until we can get Aaron to agree that we were wrong and he was right. And then of course, what we'll do is we'll group it into a category, and each round of medals gets a certain score. And if we get over 17 points, where every judge scores 17 or higher, that average and the fact that we've coupled everybody above the minimum score of a gold, it becomes a double gold. So if you see a gold versus double gold, that's where we get the confusion sometimes. So this one came in as a kind of middle red silver.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Shall we continue? Okay. The most northerly AVA that we're going to talk about today is the Ancient Lakes AVA. Recognized as an AVA in October of 2012, sits along the east side of the Columbia River along I-90. Just so you can find it as you're heading between Spokane and Seattle. Roughly 1,400 of the 162,000 acres are currently planted under vine, primarily white grapes such as Riesling, Chardonnay, Pinot Gris, and Gewürztraminer. You might find a little Merlot and Syrah also in that region. The Ancient Lakes has a unique soil structure. The Caliche was left behind the ice ages as the waters drained out of the Columbia River. So Eroica was launched in 1999. It's a labor of love between two of the world's great Riesling producers, one from Old World, Dr. Lucen Estates from Germany, and one from the New World, Chateau Michel out of Washington. An intermingling of old and new philosophies and techniques enabled the crafting of extraordinary Riesling from Washington State grapes. Named for the Third Symphony from Beethoven, Eroica reflects not only its variety and sight, but also its heritage. Bold and forward from its Washington roots, elegant and refined from its German inspiration. 2018 was a stellar growing season, and the vintage in Washington State. Warm spring temperatures were followed by mild conditions throughout the growing season, allowing for an extended hang time and flavor development. Warm fall days allowed for full ripeness and color, while cool Washington nights helped maintain crisp, natural acidity. To protect flavor intensity, grapes were harvested at night when the vineyard temperatures were the coldest. The berries were direct to the press, avoiding any possible loss of freshness caused by a crusher to stemmer. Cool fermentation created a seamless integration of fruit, sugar, and acid. Fruit-driven yeast were allowed for slower fermentation rates used to slow down the fermentation and to heighten that fruit flavor. Ernest Lucen and Bob Berthau considered dozens of small lots, each reflecting a slight difference in character depending on where the grapes were grown, resulting in the complexity of the final blend. 100% of the 2018 vintage were sourced from the Evergreen Vineyards in Ancient Lakes of AVA. Aaron, over to you.
I did not, I was not able to get this particular wine this year, but I've had the Eroica many times over the years. It's fairly consistent in its style. There's always some citrus, depending upon the year. There might be lemon or lime. One year I actually had a little bit of blood orange in there. There's always apple, which can vary from green. There's always also very crisp acidity on this, which is typical of Riesling, and a little bit of residual sugar, which helps balance out that typical Riesling acidity that you're going to get. These are balanced wines with medium body. They're decent wines. They're not great Rieslings, but they're fairly good. In the past, I've always given it about a 15.5. And this year, it looks like people that had it, Vince gave it a 14 and Sharon gave it a 15. So it's generally around the same level that it always is. We ended up giving it a bronze this year because our average was about 14.8. In a competition, you're at 14.8 and 15 is often a silver. That would require people to talk because you're really at that line. So it'd be a question of whether we give it a bronze or whether we give it a silver because we're right there at that borderline. So this is a good wine, not a great wine. But
I have the 2017 vintage, not the 18. And I know that was a cooler year for that area. So my acid levels are probably a little higher than I would imagine the 18 was. And I'm getting a little more mineral quality than probably the 18 would have been.
See, I always like that aspect in Riesling. I probably a little higher because of that.
Right, which is,
Yeah, I agree. I just drank a whole glass of it. It's delicious. With the minerality in the different year, I thought it was
What
wonderful.
did you give it, Melissa?
What did you score it, Melissa?
I gave it a 15.
Same as me. So it's
That would make
solid.
it up to 14.9.
If I could, I'd go up.
You can always go up. Go ahead. Give it a 15.
The finish was a little short to me, so I knocked it for that.
Yeah.
It just did not linger. It really sort of stopped mid-palate for me. So
I liked what you said earlier, Aaron, that these are very even-keeled, kind of level wines.
Now you're going to get a decent wine from Eroica every year.
Yeah.
It's never going to be something that you say, wow, this is amazing, but it's never going to be a real bad wine either. It's really going to be a consistently decent wine.
Yeah.
I didn't get any. One of the questions that popped up on the screen was dealing with peach or apricot flavors. I didn't notice any peach or apricot in that one. I mean, we're getting some of the citrus, but not necessarily the peach or apricot flavors.
Peaches can come depending upon the level of ripeness in the wine. Apricot, you can get that if there's a little botrytis in Riesling.
What vintage was your wine, Vince?
Not gonna really see that.
I had the 17.
Same as me.
Yeah.
I got some apricot on the aromas of the 17, the apricot, but it didn't kind of follow through into the taste.
Yeah.
Okay. Shall we continue?
Sure.
So, established in 1983, Yakima Valley AVA is Washington's oldest appellation. Today is part of the Columbia Valley AVA, and it is its largest subregion and has 4 subregions of its own. We have Rattlesnake Hills, Snipes Mountain, Red Mountain, and the brand new Candy Mountain, which caused Yakima Valley to even grow more. Containing over 18,000 vineyard acres, a few more now, it's mostly planted to Chardonnay, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon, with representation from Riesling and Syrah. Expect to see Syrah becoming more widely planted in the future. With only 8 inches of precipitation annually, the predominant silty loam soils have kept vine vigor under control. While not part of Yakima Valley AVA, the Coal Creek Vineyard is located just north of the region, and it is home to the grapes for our next wine. The vineyard was planted in 1972, and it's on its own rootstock, currently hosting Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Chardonnay, Merlot, and Riesling. This is a warm, dry site with high heat accumulation. The low-yielding old vines produce small clusters and small berries, resulting in intense varietal flavors with deep colors. The soil has a little more gravel than the loamy soils of Yakima, but still very low water holding capacity. To make Chateau Ste. Michelle Coal Creek Cabernet Sauvignon, the ripe grapes were destemmed and sorted with a grape receiving and sorting system designed to gently remove any green material from the grapes, allowing for pure varietal expression and soft mouthfeel. Daily gentle pump-overs were used to extract optimal flavor and color, along with minimal harsh tannins. The frequent racking takes place during the barrel aging to soften those tannins and enhance mouthfeel during the 22 months in 25% new French oak, 17% new American oak, and then a combination of 58% neutral oak. Aaron, over to you.
Thanks. This Coal Creek Cab, I'm always the chief German judge on this one. The color was fine, dark ruby, bright, clear, and reflective. I gave that a 3. Medium plus intensity aromas with blackberry, black cherry. There was some alcohol on the nose. There was also some coconut on the nose from the American oak. On the palate, had plus body, coconut, black cherry, plum coffee, and kind of chalky, clunky tannins. I thought that the palate had kind of like a fruit brandy feel, not quite as boozy, but it still was more like a fruit brandy feel on the palate than a wine. And the tannins and the alcohol, it was like a dysfunctional family. They didn't want to talk to the flavors. They didn't want to talk to the acid. They were in their own separate rooms. When you're talking about a wine that doesn't have integration of the components, this is an example of that. Everything there, it just doesn't come together very well. They all are standing separate. And that was a problem for me. Had a long finish of black cherry, had a lot of alcohol sweetness on the finish. This is a fruit bomb style of wine. I give it a 15 because while you have some complexity and you have some intensity, you just don't have the integration. Everything is just not coming together on this wine for me. Vince and Sharon scored it higher than I did. Vince gave it a 16. Sharon gave it a 17. So on the average, it would be a 16 overall. And this is one really that, we always score wines as to how they are today. But in some competitions where you score it as to how it's going to develop, this still wouldn't make it because I don't feel like these are ever going to come. This is not going to knit together with time. I think with time, this is just going to be a wine that just gets even more boozy.
What did you score it, Melissa?
I gave it a 16.5. And I had it transported from Sharon in these little mason jars, which worked really well. I tasted it, gave you my scores, and saved them for a week and opened them up, and I'm drinking them with you tonight. And I think it's held up really well. I get a little pencil shavings on it on the nose at this point. But I do still agree that it's discombobulated. It's not gelling together.
I liked the intensity of the fruit on this wine. The alcohol was what I deemed it for. I felt the alcohol was too high and not integrated, but I liked the fruit, but some of the fruit was a little bit on the jammy to me, but representative of 15 was a very hot year for the Valley. So you can really taste that in this wine. But I thought it was a very easy drinking, very Robert Parker style of wine, which I felt has a place. And that's why I gave it a silver. I did not give it a gold, but for me was a solid silver.
There's a question as to why we would still give it a silver medal if it's not gelling or integrated.
Because I think it has a lot of assets. I mean, it definitely has a fruit intensity. It definitely has ripeness to the fruits. It has tannins, though a little bit on the rough side. They were still had a strong presence and gave it a balance to the fruit. And the alcohol, though a little high, still had some balance to it. I mean, it wasn't a gold medal wine, but I felt like, to me, it was a solid silver.
Yeah, this had the characteristics of a wine that could have done a lot better if it had been integrated. And that's kind of why it drops. That's why I gave it a 15, which is a borderline bronze silver, but low silver, because it's got a lot of good characteristics to it. It's a wine that'll many people would really enjoy. It is just a wine that, to me, that lack of integration doesn't allow it to do better than it does, and I gave it. But I think that a lot of people are going to drink this and love it because it's a fruit bomb. It's got a lot of fruit characters to that, and some people just love that.
It does have a lot of fruit characters. I think that ripeness, a little bit, that greenness. It's very typical of a Cabernet Sauvignon. I get a little bit of the green after it's been sitting for a while. I get that nice little green pepper note comes out of it. So it kind of meets all these boxes of what a Cabernet Sauvignon is without the integration. So, I mean, I gave it a 16.5 because I thought of all those different kind of boxes that it checks.
I'm a little harsher on lack of integration than many people are. It's just something that I've had beaten into me for so many years now that it just bothers me more.
What did you give it, Vince?
So I gave it about a 16, and that was what I came up to. Originally, I was an outlier, so we didn't have our 2-point spread. And so they talked me up a little bit, but where I was able to add a little more score was I was getting a little more complexity on the nose than I was throughout the rest of the finish. So that complexity kind of helped me agree that it probably deserved a little more than the high bronze that I was giving it. So that's kind of what I was going at. And as you can see, what we tried to do is we tried to be consistent together. And, it just really depends on the skill of the people judging. And we'll argue if we really feel passionate about a wine, we'll argue what we did, and we'll retaste that wine several times throughout the process. I changed. I was probably a little different than I think the rest of you guys. You guys were pouring directly. I was core venting all the wines because I still actually have my Coal Creek sealed right here. So it's still, this is the bottle I sampled out of. It's still sealed. But I noticed I had it in the glass for a while longer, and it was actually a little better after we got off the call together. Granted, we were also talking about, that was a good brunch for me.
Yeah, I tasted it at 6 o'clock in the morning.
I had tasted it the night before, but I still had some more left over, so I just kept on drinking.
This is
go ahead.
really interesting to see how you judge it first for what is exactly in your glass versus the potential that it could be.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron, you were judging it twice, right? Because in one of you were doing a paper on it, and that was part of it, was you had to figure out how well it would go in the future, right?
Yeah, I was judging it twice. So I scored a little bit higher for that just because while it's never going to integrate, and things like I noticed somebody here saying that the wine is better today than it was yesterday. And that's because some of the clunkiness of the tannins is going to resolve a little bit with a little time in the glass and a little oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
A little time, that's going to resolve. It's never going to integrate. It's never going to be a great wine, but it's still, you're not going to have the tannins won't be quite as much of a problem.
Okay. Shall we go to the next wine? Oh, I guess I probably ought to put up what we actually had there on the screen. There we go. So we did score it as I think our average was 16.1, and that would equate to a silver medal. So located along the Oregon border, Horseheaven Hills is the home of 37 varieties of grapes. Leading the grapes are Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Chardonnay, Riesling, and Syrah. The region supports 31 vineyards and 6 wineries within its little over 500,000 acres. As you can see from the lower right-hand photo, this is a very dry location. Being on the Columbia River, though, does allow for the upriver winds to help moderate the temperatures. Comparing the Horseheaven Hills with the rest of Columbia Valley, this is a smaller AVA, does get long, sunny days that are warmer and has a predictable drop in temperatures in October, keeping the grape on the vines longer. The soil consists of windblown sand and loess, plus a lot of Missoula flood sediments, and a little bit of hill slope rubble. The terrain consists of south-facing slopes, providing excellent sun exposures for grape ripening and protection from cold airflow during the winter months. Planted in 1991, the vineyard at Canoe Ridge Estates lies on a steep, windswept, south-facing slope on the banks of Columbia River. The proximity to the river moderates the temperatures and allows for uniform ripening and excellent color development. The grapes for Chateau Ste. Michelle Canoe Ridge Cabernet Sauvignon were sorted similarly to the Coal Creek Cabernet that we just discussed. The daily pump overs during fermentation extract optimal flavor and color, plus minimizing harsh tannins. Each fermentation lot is tasted daily, darn the luck, to evaluate the evolution of the tannins, modify extraction techniques, and find the right moments to drain the wines off the skins. Finally, the wines were aged for 22 months in 46% New French oak and 54% neutral oak before bottling. Aaron, over to you.
This one, again, the color, really dark ruby, bright, clear, and reflective. Medium intensity, black cherry, plum, vanilla. On the palate, again, medium intensity, medium plus intensity with plum, black cherry, licorice, cedar, vanilla.
This one, like the last one, is 14.5 alcohol. It had chalky tannins, but on this one, everything is integrated. Everything came together here. So, you know, on the last one, the flavor, I knocked it because of that. On this one, I gave it a 5.5 on the palate. It's got a medium plus body. I got a long finish of blackberry, black cherry, and cedar. It lacks excitement, I would say, but this is a very good Washington Cabernet, and I gave it a 17. It was a better wine than the last one. And let's see, we had Sharon gave it a 18.5, and Vince gave it a 17.5. So again, I'm the East German judge. But this was 17.6. We gave it a gold.
Well, and because all four of us agreed on that gold, actually it scored out as a double gold.
I gave it a 17.
Yeah. So usually the judges don't necessarily know if they're doing it totally independent and they're not comparing their scores. They won't necessarily know. But in the back of the house, we always know when we get a double gold, and those we try to, you know, run out of the room with those. Usually somebody else catches us, but you know.
Yeah, when we're judging a competition and you get one that you really like, sometimes you'll take the glass and you'll set it aside, especially if it's close to lunch. And when you come to clear the table, you say, leave that glass alone.
I've done that a lot.
Yeah, and you don't know what the wine is when you score it, but you know that it's a good wine, so you'll drink it later.
And working in the back of the house, I go, oh, this one got a really good score. And I tell one of the people that's working in the back of the house, go, bring that bottle over here and a glass. So while you guys are still trudging along with anything else that might not be as palatable. There are advantages to being the boss at a
Definitely
competition.
more integrated, all those lovely notes, but more integrated than the last.
Yeah. Was this one, Aaron, was this one a little more long living, did you expect, or since you did the other scoring as well?
I think this one, would do better with time. Yeah, I definitely.
Okay.
I scored a 92 on that other thing, on that other paper that I was doing.
And this is only 5 years old, so yeah, what do you expect for 5 years, right?
Do we all have the
So-
same vintage?
Mhm.
I have 15.
I think we all had
You
15.
all have 15? Okay.
Yeah, if there was a sad thing about this wine is that I had these wines open, then I had some Sauvignon Blancs open as well. So I didn't get to drink all these, and I just tried that wine again today, and I've had it open for a week, and it's dead. I mean,
Oh.
Wine's a week long, you know, being open, it just didn't. You know, it's oxidized.
I still haven't opened mine, so come on over.
These little things are genius because mine tastes almost like the first time I opened.
Yeah, that would be good, but unfortunately, I
Almost.
Not a lot of air getting in those little jars.
Not a lot, no.
I Corvint mine, so they're perfect.
Well, I opened mine that night too, so I got another glass out of it. So there was a lot of air in that bottle, and then never got to it again.
The Cold Creek Cabernet Sauvignon, the one before this, definitely, I think, benefited from being opened and,
Getting a little air.
yeah. This one's great.
Okay. So we'll head off to the next wine. Officially submitted for consideration as a new AVA on September 19th, 2017, the Burn of Columbia Valley is expected to be the next AVA approved for Washington State. We'll see. They've been having a lot. Currently, over 1,200 acres of the nearly 17,000 acres that will make up the AVA are planted to the vine. Current plantings include Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, Syrah, Chardonnay, and Sangiovese. The Burn is easily distinguished from other growing areas in Washington State due to its very warm climate, high precipitation, and more moisture-retaining low soils. This climate allows for less irrigation requirements and longer hang times. The Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau accepted the petition for perfection on October 31st of 2017 and has completed its public final rule last July. And so maybe by the end of the year, the burn will be born. Speaking of born, let us now get to our final wine of the day, Born of Fire Cabernet Sauvignon. This is the only brand made in the proposed AVA to date. They also have a Chardonnay label as well. The 2017 was cooler than previous vintages, which resulted in a significantly lower yield. The weather delayed ripening and helped retain fresh fruit aromas and mouthwatering acidity. Juan Munoz Orca, the winemaker, used whole cluster fermentation and large formats, lightly toasted Hungarian oak barrels for added complexity in the wine. And Aaron, over to you.
All right, this wine, color got a 3. It's lighter than people might normally expect from Cabernet Sauvignon, but the color is actually variety appropriate. I've had some Cabernet Sauvignons from other countries that have been far lighter than this. So that's an appropriate color. Bright, clear, and reflective, but nothing bad about the appearance. Medium plus intensity aromatics. Unlike the other Cabernets that we've had that had a lot of dark fruit, this had a lot of red fruit in it. I mean, there was red cherry, there was raspberry. The tannins on this thing are silky tannins. The other ones are a little chalky. These are more silky in nature. There was a little green pepper on the aromas also, as well as on the palate, and some cedar. Now on the palate, there's some definite residual sugar on this as well, which probably helps balance out the acidity, because this is definitely a cooler climate type Cabernet Sauvignon, picked a little bit less ripe than some of the other ones. But the wine is very balanced. Had a long finish, a lot of green pepper on the finish with some raspberry and cedar. I ended up giving this a 14.5. I think it shows some promise. Judging it out of the glass today, it's a good Cabernet Sauvignon, but it lacks the complexity and it lacks the elegance that you might expect from the variety. I think that Sharon also gave it a 14.5, and I believe that Vince gave it a 16. Was it Vince?
No, I was at a 14.5 as well. I think our average was 15.
I was at a 15.5 for that one.
Okay.
Yeah, so our average took it to a bronze, I think.
Yeah, I thought that I had scored it higher than a 14.5, but my notes here say 14.5. So
Actually, we got right at 15. Our average was 15. So
Yeah.
it took it. We were, I think, before we got Melissa's numbers, we were at like 14.9 is our average, and then Melissa took us over the top to 15. So that gave us. This was one of those that we were right at that border between bronze and silver, and had this been a better quality wine, we might have argued a little bit more to get it into that silver category. This one just happened to make it in there.
but I actually like this style. It scores lower than Canoe Ridge and Cold Creek for me, but if I was going to sit on the back patio and drink a Cabernet, it would probably be this one over the other two. Just 'cause for me, this is, while not it's a wine, it's more what I like. That's one of the things you got to take into consideration, is that sometimes you're never judging it based upon what you like. You're always judging it based upon the qualities of the wine itself.
So there's a question about how the whole cluster was fermented.
I'm looking at
There is no, Juan didn't put anything in his tasting notes about carbonic maceration, which is kind of common when you're doing whole cluster. So I'm going to guess he just used a normal process. Whole cluster just usually gives you a little more tannin out of the
Out of the stem.
stems, and you're hoping for very ripe stems, because if you get that green notes in there, then you'll taste that on the wine as well. So we don't believe any carbonic maceration was done with this wine.
You're not picking up carbonic on it.
Yeah.
There's a question about the year we're tasting. We're tasting 2017. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's what I ended up receiving.
Okay.
And believe it or not, stems do ripen just like grapes do. They're green at one point, and as time goes on, they will start to lignify and you get brown, and they tend to give a wine a spicy characteristic as well as the tannins.
Vince, your time is wrong on this part too here. It's 4:30.
Yeah, it's 4:30. Yep, that's right.
So,
Yeah, it is.
Right.
4:30, yeah. For one of the wines for next week, Dave Falchek, when he sent the email, which he sent, I must say, he sent it. I did not type that or proof that. But one of the wines is wrong. The H3 is not the Cab, it is the Merlot. So if you've purchased the wines, hopefully you purchased based on the Excel spreadsheet and not based on the email that was sent out.
And I purchased based on the email that was sent out, so if anybody has the Cab and wants to discuss it, I'll probably have that.
Also, I want to thank Kristen Kraft for the Survey Monkey, doing the Survey Monkey for us. So please remember, everyone who's listening, to do your Survey Monkey of your scores. And please, you can do them individually so that we tabulate them, and those scores will be tabulated separately than from the scores for the chapters hosting the NTP that are doing it blind. Because these aren't blind, we're going to tabulate those on a separate spreadsheet. Okay.
Any other
Also,
questions?
yeah, if there's any other questions that Aaron, Sharon, or Melissa weren't able to answer, let us know. We'll try to answer those. We'll make up an answer, whatever we need to do. We got a few minutes before we get kicked off Zoom.
Can you unmute people so if they can have a question?
Yeah.
I can. So everybody, get ready. Put your credit cards away.
All right.
Okay, are there any other questions?
If you have questions, you got to unmute, and then you can ask questions.
Does anyone have questions at all?
All right.
Anybody want to join us at arguing amongst one another tomorrow morning?
My screen shows that everyone is still muted.
Yeah.
I think they have to unmute on their own.
Oh, personally. Okay.
Okay, there we go.
Trying to see-
I tried it again. I hit the unmute again. And
Hi, Jay and Carolyn. Nice to see you.
Oh, where did we go?
so so who's got questions?
I
have a question.
Here, okay.
Okay, go ahead.
What is the fires in California and Oregon and Washington doing for the grape business?
Depends on the location.
No.
I was in a conference this week with a lot of winemakers.
The one that was.
So it depends on where the winemakers are versus where the fires are. The people down in Santa Barbara were like, we're good. Fires are too far away. Depending on the climate, if you're getting a lot of clouds and rain in your area, you're getting rid of all that smoke. And if you're close into those fires, so anything east of like Napa, they're probably a lot more concerned because the smoke is coming at them and it could come onto their grapes. If they had some wineries, there was about 15 or 20 wineries I just saw on an
What?
email earlier this weekend
You can't.
saying, hey, we're just going to dump our entire lot this year, not make any wine.
Yeah, I've been
There's a
hearing
few
lot of-
wineries not harvesting. Yeah.
I've heard a lot
Some
of-
turning into brandy, like Hoops is
Yep.
turning smoke. They're showing the other wineries how to turn their smoke tainted grapes into brandy.
Randy?
So California Brandy Company, they have some really nice brandies out there. They were actually one of the few things that California was actually known for in the early 1800s. They've kept up the process. There's some of the French brandy houses have actually come here to make wine or brandies in California. So yeah, we could have some really nice California brandies here next couple of years because you're going to distill out all those bad flavors.
I've been hearing from a lot of vineyards in Napa and Sonoma that they will not be having a 2020 vintage.
Yep.
So that'll be interesting to see.
And that's also going to impact Washington and Oregon because they've been getting some fires as well. It's not as bad as Central California, but yeah, the West Coast is pretty bad.
So you collect all of the grapes?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I have a
Is there any other
question.
questions?
Anne has a question.
Sure.
I want to know, yesterday I was at the home where we did the bottling, and there was some wine left over in some places. And I want to know why it tasted so different yesterday than it did today. Was it because we had to bottle it, or, I mean, decanter, or whatever you want to call?
Oxygen always has an effect on wine.
Yes, and particularly the
With the
Cold
resulting of
Creek
some of the
one.
tannic
My taste for yesterday for the Cold Creek and today was so opposite.
Yeah, the oxygen is going to have an effect on the tannins and how you perceive them. It's also going to have an effect, when oxygen gets into a wine, causes chemical reactions with some of the flavor components as well. So it's also going to change the way that you perceive the flavors in the wine.
I can add
In
to
other words, I'm an
Uh,
expert.
that. Your palate is affected by your health, can change from day to day. Also,
Oh, yeah, definitely.
by what you've maybe eaten the previous hour or whatever. But, your palate is different, just like, your muscles are different every day. So depending on your health, take that into consideration.
What I want to say is, my scores are usually around 15, 16. When it comes to a 12 and something that I do like, that's a lot of difference.
Sure.
And it would not account for my palate yesterday or my palate today. I mean, I could see that a couple, but this was huge. I'm sorry.
I experienced that with my wines, a big difference from when I first tasted them and sampled them and gave my scores to when I just opened them up right now. I mean, I think I can understand what you're saying, I think, like Lester mentioned, everyone's different. It changes whether you had more than one cup of coffee in the morning or two is going to change how you might taste something. But I think it was maybe some oxygenation today.
There's a difference between this and this. It's huge.
No more coffee for you.
No more coffee. They just cut out my coffee. Thank you, everyone.
Do you think the wine,
I'll take off
which do you think changed more, the wine or you?
Keep your hand off of that. Interesting.
I have a
Yes, it
question.
is.
Go ahead.
I have a question about the Eroica. In the past, I've seen it advertised as a pretty high-end wine, $20, maybe more. And considering today's comments about it, I'm wondering if you think it's maybe a little overpriced or it was just a bad year that we tasted.
I'm trying to get out of that.
As a retailer, yes.
Okay.
It probably was not the best vintage that they've had. I've had better of their wines. And when we bring wines into our shop, some of it is based, some years we just don't bring their product in because we're like, this is not that good.
Well, Vince, remember, we tasted the 17 and the NTP is the 18.
Yeah.
So
it really depends on the vintage. Every year's different. It's produce. Things change. What they do in the vineyard impacts it. What they do in the winery impacts it. So I've actually, on a competition, we get to write notes to the winemakers. I've actually said, send it back again because this one wasn't ready this year. And I scored it for what's in the glass, gave them a very low score and said, try again next year or 2 years because it'll be much better. So, and that, I don't think that one's going to be the case, but everything varies a little bit. So.
Does their price vary?
Their price really doesn't because they're pretty consistent year after year. That is one nice thing about most of the larger corporations that run wines. Their wines are very consistent on pricing, which if you're buying wines, that's a really good thing because you can budget more. Sometimes you get a good deal, sometimes you don't.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Sharon, do you have anything to add? Because I know you buy a lot of wines too.
Eroica has an audience. People who drink it will always drink it, regardless of the vintage. So, I mean, it is that off-dry style, and a lot of people really like that style. It will always be off-dry. It will always have that residual sugar in there. People will continue to purchase it who like the same with the Brut, the sparkling. Again, borderline Brut. It's really an off-dry style to me, though it does fall into that Brut category. There's an audience for that. There will always purchase that wine. For me, I would put it in a mimosa. For the Eroica, it's not my personal go-to style of Riesling, but I mean, it's a sellable product that's going to be consistent.
And Sharon, actually, I did the same thing after we had done talking about it because we talked about this about 8 o'clock Central Time, 9 o'clock Eastern Time last Sunday. I took the sparkling wine and made mimosas out of it for breakfast. So one of the advantages. Somebody had a question about how we judge wines. You know, we don't go, hey, this is a really good wine. We love this one a lot, so let's give it a gold medal. We don't do that. We get a little bit of play in that. In our overall impressions, we can put a little bit in there. If we put too much of that in there, Aaron yells at us saying we're not being good judges. So we learn to judge, and as part of our certification process, based on what the characteristics are. So if you ever go through any of the what we do in the actual sessions, it's over the 3 years of the program, you learn the components and whether those components are good or not good for a wine. So that's what we're judging on when we're actually scoring it. There's the overall impression. That's where we can put a little bit of our own spin into it. If I really don't like a wine, I just can't I might dock it a half a point there, but that's about all I'm going to do. Otherwise I get yelled at.
I don't actually yell. I'm just sarcastic.
And since he's just across the river from me, I usually, find out, quickly.
Yeah, but it's one of those things. It's like I said with the Born of Fire. That's a style that I like more than the others, but I still scored it lower because characteristics.
Aaron's voice is very soft.
It's probably all the cheese.
Volume is very low.
If you're not friends with Aaron on Facebook, you haven't seen all the cheese he's been making during COVID. So that's his new hobby, is cheese making. And we keep saying we want to come over, but he goes, well, there's COVID going on. Sorry.
Yeah, well, I think it's because his house smells a little cheesy.
Any other questions?
Thank you all very much. If you have any questions that enter your mind during the course
I'd like to say something like these, we'd like to talk to each other.
always happy to hear from you.
Are they down here somewhere?
We'll be doing this again next Sunday.
Yep.
It's where it says chat. Look at chat.
So we'll see you next Sunday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. So and we'll finish up the other 6 wines.
One name message.
So appreciate you attending.
Hold on, I'm answering a question.
Okay, go ahead.
Answer a question online. If you exit it, will it?
Yeah,
Leave
I'm
the
not,
chat.
I won't kick anybody out yet.
Okay. Why don't I just answer the question verbally? A little
There
better.
you
You can taste the wines whenever. Whenever COVID is over, your chapter can certainly pull these wines and taste them again for another more private meeting if you wish. And then secondly, what was the other question? All the scores. The scores are typically, they'll be put out. Typically, we discuss them at the conferences. Sharon will get up and make a presentation, tell us everything that we need to know about the wines that we tasted. So I hope that answers everyone's question. Anybody else?
That'll probably be at the banquet. Are you doing it at the banquet or the Friday night? Do you know,
Go
Sharon?
there. See what choices it gives.
For what
For-
exactly?
To give up the results. Are you scheduled as part of the conference this year?
No, because the results aren't due. We extended the deadline.
Oh,
to
that's right.
January
So
1st. So it'll probably be just an email that's going out to everyone as
Okay.
opposed to a live.
My name's not.
because of January, so we've extended to what, to January 1st?
Yes. So
Okay.
in January, everyone will get the summary that outlines what the chapters did.
Your message.
And then we'll
So-
have Survey Monkey for the webcast
Okay,
separate.
flip over there.
Yep. So once we're done with both sessions, we're going to secure all these videos and get them posted out to the AWS website so that you can actually see these things along with any, if you want to redo the tasting, you can taste along with us. See,
Exit, okay.
It was nice drinking with you all today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Oh, what did the grape say when it got stepped on? It just let out a little wine. That's all, folks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you all.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you, Melissa, Aaron, Vince.
All of you.